Everybody. Welcome to our NeighborWorks VISTA program webinar on reporting. We're going to be talking about performance measures this afternoon for about an hour or so. My name is Debbie Wise, and for those of you that don't know my face, this is my face. I know you've heard my voice plenty of times and have gotten many emails, so I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have Sam Sauter on the webinar as well, your VISTA leader. And we also have joining us Sarah Brady. She's a CNCS program officer from the Ohio State office. She is also online. So between the three of us, you're going to have a good time and learn lots and everything you've always wanted to know about reporting in the next hour. I'd just like to make mention that we are recording this webinar, so if that's going to be problematic for you, we will be sharing the recording later. So if you need to hop off for some reason, I prefer you not, but you can do that if there's an issue with the recording. And you'll be able to ask and chat questions to us via the chat function on the Zoom platform. So all of you are muted and we can't see your faces. You only see us and we're the only ones that are able to talk, and you could chat to us and send us your questions as we go along. So please feel free to do that. Before we kick it off, I'm just gonna stop here for a second and let Sarah step in for a minute and just share with you why reporting is so vital and necessary to the success of our VISTA program.
Thanks, Debbie. I am first of all, very glad to be here with you all today. And I'm looking forward to giving you some information that will hopefully be helpful to you. That's number one. But when we are talking about any of our VISTA projects, we are wanting to make sure that we in our office, in the Ohio State office, can provide you all with the most informative and the best technical assistance. And so with that being said, when we are working with NeighborWorks America and looking at their overall project goals and successes, we're utilizing that information to determine in the future if we want to continue funding the VISTA project. I will say that NeighborWorks America is a fantastic partner of ours and grantee of ours, and that is often attributable to all of you as site supervisors and the successes that you guys are able to report. Now, big picture, why is reporting important? You guys all know why reporting is important, but in the world of VISTA, why reporting is important is for various reasons. Number one, it validates why we are investing funds within this particular project, and it validates why funds are being sub-granted out to all of you as sub-sites. And I know NeighborWorks America uses the data that you're reporting in assessing your future with the AmeriCorps VISTA project, and we want to make sure that the data that we're getting is accurate. We use all of the data that you guys are reporting, and we utilize that data to share with CNCS headquarters what your overall accomplishments are as a project. And we also utilize your information to report to Congress and let them know what is the overall impact of NeighborWorks America and national service across the country. And the reporting that you guys all do to NeighborWorks America is essential to NeighborWorks America's ability to report to us. And then the one other thing that I'll mention about why reporting is important is because it illustrates your programmatic accomplishments. It gives us the ability to celebrate all of your successes, and it also gives us the ability to provide technical assistance to NeighborWorks America and to all of you, specifically on how you can perhaps enhance your project's performance moving forward. And so those are the key components. I do want to say that we in our office also utilize the reporting when NeighborWorks America submits it to us, to understand the impact and to validate the project's necessity within its network. And so, later on we'll talk about the accuracy of data and how that can impact the project overall. But realistically, data and the reporting process is essential in helping us monitor and provide technical assistance to all of you as sub-grantees of the VISTA resource.
Thanks, Sarah. And moving right along, last week I had sent out an email to everyone that included our NeighborWorks VISTA manual for reporting. So it's okay if you don't have that in front of you right now, but I want to let you know that in that manual, it goes over all the reporting requirements for this year and gives you some detail as to what the report's asking for, when it is due, and how you should be able to get it over to us. Okay, so just give me 1 second here as I advance the slide. I'm having some technical difficulty.
That one?
Mm-hmm. No, next. Hold on. Sorry about this, folks. 1 second. Okay, we're back on. So the first report that we're going to go into more detail about during the course of this webinar is the project progress report. So all I'm going to say right now is that this is the larger report that you'll be collecting data for and submitting as part of your VISTA program. And the data for this report is collected by your VISTA members and is captured in what we're calling a performance measures reporting tool. And this is an Excel document. And again, this was emailed out to everybody, but if you don't have it or don't have access to it, let us know, we'll send it out again. So this reporting tool is what VISTA members will be using to capture their data and their narrative, their successes, their progress, everything that they need to capture about how they're moving their VISTA projects along, they'll do so in this tool. So we'll go, Sarah's going to go over this tool in more detail a little later on, and Sam actually will be going over it one-on-one with VISTA members. So more about this to come, but I just wanted you to know what this was, this project progress report. It is captured in the tool, and then sub-site supervisors will be reporting this data to NeighborWorks America online. And I'll be sending out instructions on exactly how to submit the data to NeighborWorks online, at which point NeighborWorks collects all the data that you send us. We aggregate that, and then we send it off to CNCS to meet that reporting requirement. Now, as of right now, I don't have a due date to give you. CNCS will be giving us our project period and due date for the specific report, but you can expect that it'll be anywhere from a 6 to 9 month reporting period, starting the day your VISTA started, and then anywhere from 6 to 9 months out. And as soon as I have that information, I'll be sharing that with you. Okay. Now, the next report I'd like to talk about is something that we're calling a quarterly narrative report. And again, in the reporting guide that I've emailed and on the screen, you could see the various reporting periods and the due dates for this report. Now, this one's a little bit different, where it's mainly narrative, and if you have data to put into the report, that's fantastic. We're really just looking for a paragraph or two from you and your VISTAs, and if you have photos, we love photos. Anything that highlights their accomplishments that have taken place the previous quarter, from the previous 3 months. Now, This is a report that we collect 4 times in a program year, and we ask that you aim to try and submit at least 3 of these reports, but no less than 2. The reason being is that there may be a period of 3 months where a lot just isn't happening, and there might not be a lot to report on, and that's okay. We want you to report the good stuff when you have it. Now, because we have such a large portfolio and so many subsites, the good news is that there's always a number of you reporting for every reporting period, so that gives us more information to pass along to CNCS. But please make every attempt possible to hit at least 3, aim for 4, try and hit 3, no less than 2 of these quarterly reports. Again, if you refer to your manual, that goes into more detail in terms of what type of information CNCS is looking for. So for example, they like to focus on 3 types of stories, and that's broken down into compelling stories, pathways to opportunities, and testimonials. And in that manual, we talk about the critical components that make up a compelling story, and we also offer examples. So please refer to that reporting manual when it comes time to pull together these narratives and send them in to me. And this is something you will send via email directly to me, so this is not captured in an online vehicle. This can be sent via email. And the next report we want you to be aware of is the 6-month performance review. And this is very much like a review you might give an employee. The difference being you're sitting down with your VISTA member and going over the VAD and just talking about the things that are going well and areas where you might want to take a different direction or make some improvements. Now, we also offer some tools to help you conduct the 6-month performance review. So in the manual that has been sent out, you'll see there's a self-evaluation for the VISTA member, and then there's also a review tool for the supervisor to give feedback to the VISTA. And that's going to be due on March 16th, which is about midway for everyone's VISTA year. And that, again, will be submitted to me via email. And then another report is your VISTA attendance report. And you've all seen the emails. This is something that I send to you from the vista@neighborworks.org address. And it's basically a reminder to say if for some reason your VISTA hasn't been reporting to service, that you need to let me know immediately. So it really does act more like a reminder. There's no action needed on your part if everything is running smoothly and there are no issues. But if there's something you need to make me aware of, don't hold on to that. Let me know right away. We don't want to run into a situation where a VISTA has stopped reporting for service and then receives an overpayment. So I go into eGrants on a bi-weekly basis, and I submit this report on your behalf. And the way I know how to fill this report out is based on how you respond to this email that you get from me every other week asking if your VISTA is reporting for service. Like I said, if they're reporting for service, there's no need to email me. I only need to know if there's an issue, in which case we'll address it. So that's the attendance report, and just as a reminder, all of you should be using some type of a timesheet tool to track your VISTA's leave days. And then the final report is the end of year VISTA performance evaluation. And that's part of the future plans form that CNCS requires, gets filled out as part of the process that we go through to exit a VISTA out of service. So you'll have an opportunity to evaluate your VISTA's performance at the end of the year through this form. And we will email you the form, and actually you could see a copy of it in the manual that you have. And for supervisors, you will be filling out Part B of this evaluation form, sending it back to me, to NeighborWorks, actually to Sam in this case. She'll be sending it my that reporting questions. If you try and start using it a little bit, you can direct those questions to Sam next week, and she's going to give you a demo and talk a little bit about her experience. So, you know, if you're not at a point where you're comfortable asking questions today, or don't have a question, or just need time with the tool, this is an opportunity for you to sit with it, use it a little bit, and then join the webinar next week. And she'll be sending out an email with a calendar invite. So you'll have all that information before the end of today. Okay, and then that's it. Those are all my slides that I wanted to cover. So Sarah, I'm going to hand this over to you because I know you had a few slides yourself talking about reporting. So you can go ahead and throw your
Debbie, are you using my? Okay, going to be hopefully. There's a lot of reporting required specifically to the works of this project. So I know that what you promised sound daunting. VISTA for several years project was responsible for creating a fantastic reporting data collection tool that should make all of your reporting easier moving into the future. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about the reporting tool, but I want to do that by way of talking through a couple of data points that exist within the report and what you will be expected to report when you are submitting progress reports and your monthly reports. So you should be seeing a new slide for me at this point. Debbie, can you confirm you're seeing a new slide for me?
Yeah, I can see the slide. We can actually see the slides on the left and then the big slide in the middle.
Oh, interesting, and I cannot see that.
If you just go to your PowerPoint and you say view and then preview or whatever, it should come up. But if you go to view and then...
how is that?
Perfect. You got
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'm a little technologically challenged, clearly. So where I was going specifically was I wanted to talk about some of the data points that we know that you are going to be collecting throughout the year that are then going to be reported back to NeighborWorks America. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is very small print, likely, and but this is an all-inclusive list of all of the data points that we collect in our progress report supplements, which NeighborWorks America is submitting on your behalf once a year. And then these data points also come up in the progress report, the general progress report that Debbie had mentioned that covers anywhere from a 6 to a 9 month period. And a lot of the data points specifically relate to items like dollars and of dollar value of cash and resources that are leveraged, dollar of in-kind resources that have been leveraged, the number of the number of veterans and military families engaged in national service. So once you get the recording and the PowerPoint information after the call, you'll be able to read through these lists in a more detailed format. I don't want to read through these lists because I think that's redundant when you can go ahead and scan these on your own. So you'll see here, aside from what I would like to call on this previous page, our capacity building big picture goals. What we then move into are capacity building goals that specifically relate to various focus areas that our grantees have to report out on. The NeighborWorks America VISTA project lands in the economic opportunity focus area for the corporation. And so when we get into looking at the actual reporting tool, you're going to see that you'll be doing a lot of reporting related to economic opportunity and looking at larger capacity building goals related specifically to economic opportunity. We also ask, and this is a kind of a tricky subject for all of our VISTA projects. As you know, all of your VISTA members are working on very specifically capacity building goals. You'll hear me say that a lot of times throughout this presentation. With that being said, we expect that there is some impact of the VISTA program on individual beneficiaries within local organizations. Some organizations are able to drill down to the beneficiary outcomes, meaning you, in some cases, will be able to measure and see the impact of the VISTA member service on the local community because of VISTA members developing a new program or recruiting volunteers who are going to be working with clients directly. Not everybody is going to be able to drill down to those specific outcomes related to beneficiaries. But we want to collect the data related to beneficiaries and the beneficiaries who have been impacted as a result of the VISTA member service when it's appropriate. And so, or when it is possible. So we are going to be talking a little bit about the beneficiaries of service, and we're doing so understanding that some of you will not necessarily have the capacity to drill down to that level, but some of you will. So I just wanted to mention that and mention that these data points do exist, and there is a reason that they do exist within all of our reporting. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a data tool that, again, was created by a NeighborWorks VISTA a leader and has been adopted both by the NeighborWorks VISTA project and by the all of the projects here in the state of Ohio. And I put in this this little cartoon here so you can see, again, an illustration of why data is important and why the accuracy of your data is important. I think this illustrates why we need to make sure our data is accurate, because we know we can make up data, but when it comes down to and drills down to your programmatic success, we want to make sure everything you are reporting is accurate. So with that being said, the data tool includes several components. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the data tool right now so you guys can all look at that while I go through my bullet points from the PowerPoint presentation. And I want you to be able to look at the data tool and then understand that you'll have the PowerPoint at your disposal later with the descriptions that I'm going to be providing now. So we're going to switch over, and you should now be able to see the actual data reporting tool that does exist for you. Debbie or Sam, can you confirm that that is what you're seeing? Okay, I see thumbs up, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. So with the data collection tool that was created, it includes several components, and I want to walk you through it so you understand all of the sections of the tool and how you'll access each section of the tool for starters. So for those of you who are comfortable and familiar with Excel, this should be pretty simple for you. For those of you who are Excel challenged, which I sometimes am, this may be a little more complex. So what I first want to do is talk about navigation of Excel in general. And I apologize if some of this information is elementary, but I want to make sure that you are set up for success. That is my ultimate goal. So the first thing I want to mention is with this Excel spreadsheet, there are various tabs along the bottom of the screen. And these tabs you'll see here, you'll see your cover sheet, the volunteer tab, resource development tab. So all of these tabs are what you are going to click through to to collect data related specifically to your project. Now, what I want to point out, because this is can be confusing to some folks, is at the bottom of the screen there are all of these tabs. And once you get to new business processes, it looks like maybe there aren't any additional tabs. So to make sure you're seeing all of the tabs that have data collection points, you'll want to use these arrows at the bottom of the screen to make sure you're gaining access to the miscellaneous tab and the stories from the fields tab. Now again, I realize that was an elementary description for those of you who are familiar, but I even still to this day sometimes miss those tabs when I'm talking about this particular tool. But what I want to do is I want to go back specifically and talk about the cover sheet and how this tool works. So first of all, as VISTA members, since there are several VISTA members on the call, you're likely going to be responsible for filling out this tool. And for VISTA supervisors, you're going to likely be utilizing this tool to be able to aggregate information and report it back to NeighborWorks America. With that being said, this first page here, this cover sheet, is the part of this tool that is going to be of most value to the VISTA supervisor. And I say that because once all of the additional tabs within this tool, like the volunteers, resource development, community needs assessment, once all of that data is entered by your VISTA member, all of that data is going to aggregate straight up to this page, this cover sheet, and you'll be able to see all of the data points and all of the actual accomplishments that have been that are a result of your VISTA members rolled up into this one first page. So you'll be able to see the total number of community volunteers recruited by the VISTA member, managed, hours of service completed, etc. Then when you scroll down, this top portion of this tool, so under this activities, this focuses specifically on what we would call demographic data within the corporation. Below this portion of the tool on the cover page, you're going to get into information that is specifically related to the focus areas that you are all working on within the NeighborWorks America VISTA project. And so what we have in this tool is the one focus area that all NeighborWorks America VISTA members work on, and there are objectives identified here in the second column of this sheet, which are financial literacy, housing, and employment. Now, we drill down even further by going down to what are called the anti-poverty measures, which specifically speak to the beneficiary outcomes. And so I'm showing you this second portion, the economic opportunity portion, because this is where you'll glean the data that specifically speaks to your beneficiaries. And on the top of this page is where you're going to find the very specific data that speaks to the overall capacity building goals. The volunteer section of this document, well, first of all, I want to point out that this tool is great because it provides all of the instructions at the bottom of each individual tab and key terms that we're looking at and that we're going to want to have filled out within each section of your reports. So when you get this tool, or it sounds like a lot of you have it already, you can scroll down to the bottom of each tab and learn more about what each of the definitions are within each particular tab. So focusing on the volunteer tab, we're actually looking at here data specifically related to any volunteer recruitment and volunteer service activity hours. Now, it's very important, and this can get very confusing, to a lot of grantees and VISTA members. When VISTA members are reporting out on, so VISTA members, the one key takeaway is when you are reporting out on anything within this work, within this tool and collecting this information, all of the information should be specifically related to what you have done and what you have accomplished as VISTA members. So supervisors, keep that in mind while you are helping the VISTA members navigate this document. You only want to include numbers that can specifically and directly relate to the VISTA member activities, number one, and number two, that you have documentation to back up if ever we were to do a monitoring visit and ask, how do we know how many volunteers were actually recruited by the VISTA member? We'll want to see whether it was a spreadsheet or a database, how you were collecting that information and associating that volunteer with the VISTA member. So what you're going to do as VISTA members is you're going to recruit your volunteers and then enter into the box related to whether you're working on financial literacy, housing, and employment, the number of volunteers that you had recruited for those specific activities. And because I want to show you the roll-up once we get through this activity, I'm going to enter some numbers here. So we'll say that you recruited 10 volunteers for financial literacy efforts. If you are then able to aggregate and know how many hours were served by those recruited volunteers, you would go ahead and enter those hours here in this box. So we'll say you recruited 10 volunteers. Maybe they served over the reporting period. We'll say that as collectively they all served 10 hours, so 100 hours were contributed by these volunteers. Then the number of volunteers managed. This gets very tricky when we talk between volunteers recruited and volunteers managed. Number one, because managing VISTA members, or excuse me, managing community volunteers doesn't necessarily lead to a sustainable activity. So if you're a VISTA member, if you are a VISTA member and you are currently managing volunteers on a regular basis, you want to work on a sustainability plan associated with that. But number two, what we want to be very careful with is that we're not duplicating numbers of hours. So if you as a VISTA member are recruiting volunteers and then those volunteers are serving and you are counting those 100 hours under recruited volunteers, then we don't want to have those hours also reported under volunteers managed. Now, this is confusing and this is new information for those right now, but we want to make sure that we're not double reporting the number of hours served by managed volunteers or by recruited volunteers. So keep that in mind. We're going to work on getting more clarification on what that means later. Now, once you identify how many volunteers are recruited and how many volunteers, how many hours were served by the volunteer, if you are able to drill down to what the impact was on the clients who were served by these volunteers. So let's say with this first focus area and objective of financial literacy, these 100 hours were provided services to 200 clients within your community. And it was through receiving financial literacy services. And you are absolutely able to tie those beneficiaries to the services conducted by the volunteers recruited. You're going to go ahead and say 200 beneficiaries were actually served and received some financial literacy services. The next question is related specifically to what was the outcome for that particular beneficiary. And this is where it's even harder to drill down as to whether the beneficiary has an improved financial knowledge or access to housing or in stable, affordable housing. If you are able to get at that information, let's say 200 beneficiaries received services, and we know of those beneficiaries who simply received services, 50% of them had improved financial knowledge. So we're going to go ahead and put 100 individuals. You can state very specifically that they have improved knowledge as a result of these financial literacy activities. Once that data is entered, again, what you're going to see is that you looking at the cover sheet of the document will be able to very specifically see the number of volunteers that were recruited, the number of hours of service completed by community volunteers, and that rolls directly up to this particular page. We then move to the resource development section, which is specifically speaks to finance additional funds that are coming into your agency as a result of the VISTA members service. So for the VISTA members out there, we're really looking to see how you have impacted your organization's ability to work on financial literacy, housing, or employment through cash donations or in-kind donations, and also simply the number of grants that were submitted by a VISTA member. So if you are a VISTA member and you submitted 5 grants and you received $50,000 in funds, you're going to go ahead and put that number into the value of cash resources leveraged. If it comes to in-kind resources leveraged, again, if we were to do a monitoring visit, we're going to come out to see or request information and data to see that you have actually valued these in-kind resources at a market rate. And so we'll want to see how you're documenting that and where that documentation lives. So let's say you got new computers donated to you as VISTA members, you brought it into the organization. You got 5 computers at $2,000 a piece, so that would be $10,000 in-kind resources leveraged. And of course, I don't do mental math very well, so that could have been a really bad calculation, but we'll just say it was $10,000 raised. Then for VISTA members, I want you to hear this and understand the intent behind and the spirit of this statement. The number of grants that you have submitted as a VISTA member or the dollars that you leveraged as a VISTA member should reflect activities that you had a heavy hand in doing for your agency. If your agency already had a grant proposal that was halfway done, it only needed a couple of more pieces of information added when you came on board, I would venture to say that that's an activity that would not necessarily be related specifically to you and a result of your activities. And so we wouldn't necessarily want to see that here as a grant that you submitted, but instead see that in the story section that we have later on in this tool. But if you submitted 5 grants during your project, during your reporting period, you'll enter those grants here. Now, what I want to do is I want to directly associate and relate each of these tabs, so your volunteer and your resource development tab, specifically to the tab here under stories from the field. So when you are reporting in the resource tab that you brought in $50,000 to your organization, in your reports to NeighborWorks America, especially those quarterly story reports that Debbie is asking for, she's looking for very specific details. What grant did you submit? Where did you get this funding? How is this funding going to support your cause? And so once you identify here in this dollar value of cash resources leveraged or grants and funding proposals submitted, you're going to want to go over to the Stories from the Field tab and make sure that you are identifying in this text box the actual resources that you brought into the organization. And you'll include what grant you wrote, you'll include dollar amount, and you'll include how this is helping with financial literacy. I also am not a spelling whiz, so excuse my typos. So that story from the field is going to help substantiate the actual data that you are going to be collecting and then reporting to NeighborWorks America. So hopefully that illustrates to you how just because you might only be submitting a progress report every 6 to 9 months, this tool can be useful for those quarterly reports that Debbie is asking you to submit with actual stories from the field. We then move to the community needs assessment section. And within the community needs assessment, you're going to be identifying if you completed a community needs assessment related to any of these types of activities. And what we mean by community needs assessment, your agency, if you're the VISTA member on this call, your agency may have already said, people need financial literacy, but they don't know necessarily what that means for this particular community. So you're doing the research to understand what is needed for that particular objective. That would be community needs assessment. You're assessing the needs of the local citizens, the local beneficiaries, to understand what they are going to be achieving or what they need rather for services to achieve their own personal success. And that would be considered a community needs assessment, and you'd want to go ahead and identify that you completed that here. Now, I don't anticipate any VISTA member doing more than one community needs assessment during their service term, unless you're working on several different communities as part of your service. We then move to the last two tabs for what I would call demographic data, and I'm just going to go ahead and say did one financial literacy community needs assessment. We're going to now look at the new the training tab. One of the most powerful things that VISTA members do is create training opportunities for community volunteers to deliver programming in their local communities. And we want you to have the credit for having created those training opportunities as VISTAs, and we want you as the organization supervisors to make sure you're attributing some of those successes to the VISTA members. So going in line, since we're sticking with financial literacy as my example, if your VISTA member or you as a VISTA are creating a training that is going to be delivered to volunteers and even staff of the agency, you'll want to identify the types of trainings that you've created, include that in the stories from the field section. You're going to want to explain the number of staff and volunteers that actually received the training. And so we'll say we recruited 10 volunteers, but maybe 3 staff within your agency also went through the training so that they can deliver the programming as well. In that case, we would say 13 volunteers and staff received training for this particular purpose. And then we'll identify the number of training events provided. Hopefully for 13 volunteers, you only had to do 1 training, but that's a perfect world and maybe not likely. And so you may have had to deliver this training twice to train all of those 13 individuals. So you'll go ahead and put 2 training events here because that's what you delivered to your constituents. Bad word, to your volunteers. And so keep in mind that you want to capture all the staff that were involved in and engaged in receiving training. New business processes, again, instructions and key definitions are all going to be here on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, business processes, this is when you as a VISTA member are enhancing a business process or creating a new business process. Maybe the financial literacy program, maybe there's a consumer credit department that you're serving with as a VISTA member. They don't have any business processes specifically for tracking volunteers or for recruiting volunteers. If you are creating that process or that tool for tracking the information, whether it's a database, an Excel spreadsheet, maybe you're creating a marketing process for utilizing social media, you're going to want to identify the number of new processes. And in my description right there, I mentioned a couple of things. I mentioned social media marketing. I mentioned the creation of a volunteer recruitment process. I mentioned the creation of a database. In that case, you will have impacted 3 business processes, and so we'll go ahead and enter here 3 new business processes were created by VISTA members. Under the miscellaneous tab, this is where we get at a number of items that are not necessarily directly associated with your focus area just in name, but they typically speak specifically to beneficiaries or different specific demographics of volunteers who may participate in your program. So you're going to see a number of things. We are looking for you to identify, if you can, the number of disadvantaged youth receiving financial literacy, housing, or employment services offered. So if you're a VISTA member who happens to be working on all three of these objectives in some capacity, you're going to collect data for all of these individuals or all of these objectives that impact, let's say, the youth. You're going to include all of that youth data into this one specific measure here on this final page, because this particular measure is asking for financial literacy, housing, and employment. So make sure you're reading through the performance measure very specifically to understand exactly what we're trying to collect. We're also looking for numbers of veteran and military families who are engaged in providing services. So these might be community volunteers that you recruited. So you'll read through all of this information and enter the data points as you are able, and as you are able to back up with backup documentation within your community or within your project. Once you complete that section, and I recommend as VISTA members, this is something you fill out once a week even, so that you are making sure every piece of information that you are impacting through the year is being completed, and it'll make it a lot easier for your VISTA supervisor to be able to see your accomplishments on a weekly, monthly basis, and it will give them a better knowledge, your supervisors, of what you are accomplishing that can then be shared back to NeighborWorks America. Lastly, we do have the stories from the field section, and this is really getting at the more anecdotal data or stories that are related specifically to your accomplishments as VISTA members. And so you'll want to go ahead and include any stories that are associated with the data that you reported earlier. We take these stories, we share them on our social media page. We share these stories to our headquarter office. Tina uses these stories when she's talking to our congressional leaders here in Ohio. So make sure that you're sharing these stories because they are hugely impactful. Once all of these sections are completed, again, we're going to be able to go back to the cover sheet, and you're going to be able to see, now clearly we'll want you to have the name of the reporting VISTA, the email address, etc. We're not entering that right now. But again, supervisors, you're going to be able to see the number of community volunteers recruited, the number of service hours completed, etc. for this VISTA member. Now, I believe that NeighborWorks America drills down to asking you number of volunteers recruited for each specific objective. And that's where each individual tab is going to be helpful for you in those particular reports. Then you'll be able to get at the beneficiary data down here at the bottom of the screen. And of course, we only focused on financial literacy for the purposes of this presentation. So we only see that beneficiary data for this particular section of the report. So what I want to do is I'm going to flip back to the PowerPoint presentation just here briefly for a couple more points before I hand it back over to Debbie. The first is I have, and just because of timing, I couldn't go through all of these activities, but I created these a couple of years ago, and there are some activities where you can take case studies that I developed and actually use them. So maybe this is something Sam wants to explore with VISTA members later on, but there are these actual case studies that can help you identify what data is missing from these stories and what data you'd want to collect and make sure is going into this particular tool. And so you'll see that the case study then drills down specifically to what we should be collecting and reporting in the document, but it also goes deeper and it gives you another case study and some ideas to use. And then it also goes into this last component where a VISTA member shared a story about how service has impacted her specifically. And this would be another inclusion that you would want to make in the miscellaneous section of the reporting tool, as this information can be pretty impactful for our elected officials in understanding how national service impacts not only the beneficiaries, but also the participants in the VISTA program. So why do we want you to use this tool? It's easy reporting for you and your progress reports. This is going to allow for NeighborWorks America to ensure consistency of the data and the information that they're reporting, and that all of you have the same definitions and the same targets that you're working from. And then it also helps us combine stories with the actual data. So it gives us the ability to understand how your stories are actually related to the data that you're collecting. And then, of course, for monitoring purposes, and this is more for supervisors, as I'd mentioned, when we do a monitoring visit, one of the things we can ask very specifically is, Debbie, okay, so you're reporting these accomplishments for UMPQA. UMPQA, if you're on the phone, sorry, you're the only organization I could think of off the top of my head. And with that being said, Debbie would then call you and say, we need the backup documentation, please share that with me. With this tool, you can very specifically share that data back to us. So I walked you through this tool. Hopefully you can understand the value add of using this tool, and hopefully you have time to go through the case studies and get a better understanding of what is valuable and useful to report in this tool moving forward. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to Debbie, because I bet she has a few more things to add, and then I'm sure Sam has some questions that have come in from the field. So Debbie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, before we get to questions that might have come in, I would just like to reiterate something Sarah had mentioned in terms of the frequency of capturing your reporting or jotting down your data. Sarah mentioned, jotting numbers down on a weekly basis, which is fantastic. But I am asking you to track data at a minimum monthly. If weekly works better, then go for it. But what we really want to see is VISTA members having a monthly file for this performance management tool. So you'll have a month for October, November, December, January, and you will file this at your agency's site. That way, when we come to visit, you can easily pull that up and show that to us when we ask to see it. And then also, when reporting time comes, it's easy for your supervisor to go into the file database, pull the monthly reports. So if I'm asking for a reporting period that covers 6 months, they can pull those 6 months, aggregate that data, and report it into me into NeighborWorks. So please, at a minimum, be capturing this data on a monthly basis and weekly if you need to. Another thing that we're really looking for from members and supervisors is when reporting time does come around, in addition to you reporting out on your data and your stories from the field, we really want to see some supplemental data to go along with that. And what I mean by that would be any brochures or handouts or marketing materials that your VISTAs produced, photos even. Because what we do is we take all that information and we incorporate that into our big report that we send over to CNCS. So visuals are fantastic. So data, we have narrative, and anything of a visual nature, we put into a giant report and we send that to CNCS. So please keep that in mind. I will remind you when the time comes to submit this, but that supplemental data is something that we really like to see and just really makes our report kind of more impactful. So I'm going to ask Sam now, are there any questions that came in that we can direct towards Sarah?
No, all of the questions in the chat will be things that I can go over in my member webinar. Gary had some specific questions about his project, and we can talk about that
Also, Crystal Dawn was asking if the slides that she got before were current, so we can make sure that everyone gets the most updated slides, and a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll be sending out the link to the recording. We'll be sending out the slide deck, the slides that I used and the slides that Sarah used. You all have the actual Excel tool, and you all have a user guide that goes along with it, as well as the manual that covers all the reporting requirements for the NeighborWorks VISTA program. If you need me to resend that, or you can't find it or don't have it, please reach out. We can get that out to you very easily. And I'd just like to say to Sarah, thank you for joining us today and going through all that. Do you have any last comments or remarks for us before we wrap up, Sarah? Oh, you're on mute.
All right. So no, I really don't. My last comments are for the VISTA members specifically. We certainly value your service here out of the Ohio State office. We value you and all of that you're doing for your local communities. And we look forward to what you have to report to us. And we certainly appreciate all of the accomplishments that you have had to this point and will have throughout the remainder of your service term. So thank you for your time and attention. And for the sponsors or supervisors on this call, again, we want to make sure that you are getting the technical assistance that will make you be successful. So feel free to reach out at any time, and we'll be certain to help you answer any questions that you do have. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. As a reminder, Sam will be holding a webinar next week. Details will be in your email box before the end of the day. And if any questions arise at any time, you know how to get a hold of us. Please call, email, and we'll be here to walk you through anything you need help with. Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye. Have a great rest of the day.